just going to spend a few minutes setting some books up here, and then we'll get started. We tend to, at Inkwater Press, we're a small publisher in Portland. We do some traditional, mostly self-publishing, and we basically go out around to different libraries and in different places throughout Oregon, some in Washington, and give little talks about self-publishing usually. This one, I'm going to try to talk a little bit about traditional publishing as well, and the differences and sort of where we're, how things have changed in the last 15, 20 years. And then we'll just kind of open it to discussion, and any questions that you have self-publishing related. If I didn't, I'm a little intimidated by seeing the self-publishing talk, because that wasn't quite what I thought I was talking on the whole time, but that's fine. I talk about it every day, all day. So just give me a few minutes and we'll get going here, okay? Again, thank you for coming, and we love coming out and getting a chance to talk to people in the community, and oftentimes really sort of trying to educate folks on what it means to traditionally publish, what it means to self-publish. There's a lot of crazy words that float around out there: vanity press, author subsidy, publishing, and we'll talk a little bit about how that whole thing has changed. So the first thing I would like to sort of talk about is how the book industry was 20 years ago. My name, I should start with my name really. I'm Sean Jones. I'm the acquisitions director at Inkwater. I've been there for about 8 years, and my job is to talk to people about publishing, and I review every manuscript that comes in initially before we really talk about money or contracts, because we really want to know what is the author trying to accomplish, where are they in their traditional hunt, if they're still out searching for a traditional publisher, what's their book about, do they have copyright issues or permissions that they need to look into in order to publish this book. There's a lot of misconceptions about what is public domain and what is not. So I'll try to touch on any and all of those things. My hope is to just, we'll go through this, and then we should have some time to answer any questions that you have in whatever direction you want to take it. So when we think about traditional, and when I say traditional publishing, I mean the old school way of you pitch your book either directly to a publisher. Usually those are smaller independent publishers, maybe a university publishing press. If you're looking at one of the bigger presses, one of the big five, say, usually you're going to have to acquire an agent. That can be difficult sometimes out here on the West Coast. Most of the stuff that happens with traditional agents happens in Chicago and New York. We don't have a plethora of information to send out to people, but if you are looking for an agent, I always recommend the Writer's Market that comes out every year. It's probably available, I would assume, online now, but it gives you detailed information about agents, who they are, where they are, and that would be something that would be worth looking into if you're serious about going down that route. There are lots of publishers that you can submit to directly. All of them have their own guidelines. Some want a synopsis, and they want multiple different things besides just your manuscript. So sometimes authors will come to us and will say, well, actually we're kind of the folks that you come to once you've decided that you don't want to try this traditional thing anymore. We do really look at every book, and we look at the quality of books or manuscripts that we're receiving. And I often tell people, come to a writing workshop or take a class if it looks like they're a new writer and still working on that craft don't spend a bunch of money before you're ready, because publishing sometimes, self-publishing certainly can hit the pocketbook, and you need to sort of approach it like a business or an expensive hobby, depending. But you will always want to research that particular publisher. If you're submitting for traditional, find out exactly what their guidelines are, what they need you to do, and how they want it presented. Because half of the battle is just getting your stuff in there looking great, so that I imagine they get thousands of submissions, so you want to kind of stand out if you can. Differences with traditional, generally they're going to pay you in advance. Although it seems to be getting less and less money that they're paying for advances, and now I'm hearing from several authors that a lot of publishers are asking authors to get their own marketing or publicity person, which in my mind sort of defeats the purpose of being traditionally published, because really the huge advantage to it is usually their connection, their channels, and they should have a marketing strategy already in place. They should be putting that all together for you. But you know, times have changed, and generally that means that apart from the advance, you'll probably earn royalties somewhere between 8 and 12% after they have recouped their costs. That can vary from publisher to publisher, but yeah, you're kind of, the money that you're making, unless your book really takes off, is going to be that advance up front. The publisher will get the rights to the book, and again, yeah, but
you mean if
not with self-publishing, with traditional publishing.
Can I ask you a quick
Sure,
question?
yeah.
Does that mean that if Hollywood comes and wants to make a movie about your book, they get all the money?
Oftentimes it does, and so it's, you know, you will want to sit down and go through that contract, fine tooth and comb. I mean, even digital ebooks has a different format, and so you want to see where your rights are on all of these things if you're going traditional. You would also want to look at, do they have international rights? So yeah, and sometimes they'll even ask you for the rights to the next book that you're coming out with. Again, it varies, but you really want to be aware of all of those things. But getting back to some of the other positive things about it, generally they will create, the publisher will create an advanced reader copy. They'll send it out to retailers, buyers, out for book reviews to try to get blurbs for the back of the book. So they do a lot of this footwork 4 to 6 months before the book is published. Usually it will take a year to 2 years to get your book out. So that's something to think about as well, especially if you have a really timely book. We've had a couple of people that have come to us with current affairs books that it is really timely. There's books around elections or some big ballot measure issue that they want to get out by a certain time, and that's another good reason to look at that self-publishing route, just because it's a lot quicker turnaround. The life of a book, in general, once the publisher gets it, they're gonna handle everything. They're gonna handle the editing of the book, and because they have rights, you don't necessarily get a say in that. Again, it comes down to your contract. I'm sure Stephen King gets to say whatever he wants to about his book, but Sean Jones is probably not going to have a lot of push. They'll do the editing, they'll do the design work, they'll create a cover, as I said, get all the blurbs and things like that for the back, and then retailers will place orders for those books before it's even published. So we do get some people that will say, hey, you know, well, I have a bestseller here. what's the process of getting this book out there so it can be a bestseller? Well, generally it's your namesake. So Stephen King is a bestseller. His book that he hasn't even written yet is a bestseller coming out because the buyers the stores will buy in big quantities that it is already on that bestseller list before the book even comes out. So it's, you know, occasionally it does happen. You see somebody from a smaller press or somebody out of the blue that has a really topical book will hit that bestseller list, but it's few and far between. Also, most publishers, I would say, the big ones especially, they're about 10% of the books are the ones that make money. And 90% of the books, that's what's allowing that other 90% to get out there and give them that depth of inventory. So they really focus in on that top 10%. And generally what happens is once the bookstores, if they really like the book, they're gonna order, you know, 20 copies for their store. If it's, you know, Stephen King, it's hundreds of thousands sometimes. I used to work for Borders when it was still around, and we would just get pallets of the new Harry Potter book. I think we'd get probably 7 pallets of those, and we would just have to sit on them, and they would be wrapped up so nobody could look at them. But we would have them several weeks before the book came out. So they will order, and they order on a terms of returnability, and so they want to be able to return any books that they're not selling. And retailers will also want used to be as high as 55% retail discount off of the retail price, which is a huge chunk, and if you think about it, those places are getting the lion's share of the money that's coming in for that book. However, bookstores were also working within that margin of only 55 or 40%, and so they've also got to find other products to be profitable, and that's why you've seen such a huge shift. You see a lot more bargain books at stores, and a lot of stores are going to secondhand stuff as well because there's just a better margin on it. The other thing about it is that once if the book doesn't sell, say they get 50 books and you sell 2 in the first month, they're going to return 46 of those books probably. So all the royalties that seemed like were coming in the front end are going to all go away because then shipping costs are also going to be piled on that. And that comes up in self-publishing as well. There are some ways to offer returnability. We've tried it out with a few individual authors that wanted to self-publish, with the caveat that you better be sure that you're going to sell a lot of books. And the last one that we did, really great gluten-free baking book that this woman did, excellent photography in it. She finally convinced us, I want to do returnability, and for 6 months was great. And then that 6-month mark hit, and all the bookstores started peeling back how many they actually wanted to carry in the store, and so then we started receiving returns, and you know it gets expensive and depressing fast because you're actually paying the shipping as well. A lot of times you're having to sell 5 books for every book that's returned. So things to think about. Also from my book store experience, oftentimes people think, oh, well, if my book gets in a bookstore, it's going to sell like crazy. Well, I've seen so many great books that I really liked that was right down my alley. We would get 2 copies or 1 copy in the bookstore. And where is that going to go? It's going to go spine out on a shelf. So all you're going to see is that thin spine. It's not displayed in the front of the store. So unless somebody's really coming in to look for that specific book, it's very hard to sell large quantities, because even if they buy that book, it's probably a month or 2 month cycle before they get that book replenished in the store. And so it's unfortunate. Booksellers and myself used to complain all the time when we would get really great books. We're like, no, we can sell this book. We should get some more. But usually the bigger stores they have, like Barnes & Noble, will have a centralized buying group in New York, and they kind of make the decisions there, and there's less control at the store level. So I didn't mean to paint a dark picture of traditional publishing. I mean, if you can get a traditional deal, these are just things that I would bring up and talk to them about before you sign anything. Having said that, I would also warn you about some self-publishing companies out there that pretend to be traditional. One of the big ones, I think, just went out of business. But they would tell you, oh, we're going to cover everything. Yeah, you're going to be involved, but you just have to buy 500 books. Well, if you have to fork out money for your books, then it's not necessarily, if they're making you do that as part of the contract, then that's just another form of self-publishing. If you're traditionally published, it is normal that you would pay for some books that if you wanted to personally take some books out, you probably would end up paying for them at a very, very low cost. But you shouldn't be forced to at any time. So self-publishing back 20 years ago was quite a bit different, because first of all, the printing presses were largely just the offset printing, which it's not cost effective to print less than 500 books. So you see a lot of people that are self-publishing. They've got a garage full of books that they're trying to make sure that they're not getting damaged. They're also having to figure out how they're going to distribute those books. You know, whether you're still going to do a lot of knocking on bookstore doors and different retailers, but having to figure out how to set up contracts with all of these places, it really was tough work. Some of the things that with self-publishing, let's see, I talked about that, returnability. Yeah, and oftentimes it came down to people would call it a vanity press, because they figured the only reason anybody would do this is just so that they can publish their book and they can say, oh, you know, yeah, I'm a published author. Lots of very famous people have self-published. I'm sure you know the story of J.K. Rowling. That's how she started. Printed, I don't know, 500 books and then sent them to every library throughout the UK and Scotland, Ireland. And that was, once she got those librarians on board, it was pretty smooth sailing for her. So things began to change as the economy started to slip. Profit margins got lower. Bookstores started carrying fewer and fewer titles, and more of, you know, the James Patterson books that James Patterson didn't actually write, but it'll say James Patterson with so and so. He would sort of storyboard it, and then they would take it. Well, they were just gobbling those up. So all these obscure, interesting mystery writers suddenly were not getting agents, not able to get book deals, and they're kind of left out in the cold with really good books, but nobody wanted to touch them, nobody wanted to invest in them because of the unstable book market. So they started buying also in smaller quantities, so the books that they used to buy 20 of, they now buy 4 of, and so you have, again, less chance to be displayed, and you're barraging customers with just the big books, the hopeful money makers, and so it really kind of put a kink in the chain for a lot of authors. From a publisher's perspective, there was a heavier influx of returns as well, because bookstores were no longer sitting on books for 6 months. They were like, well, let's cull it down at 1 month, and then at 3, we're going to decide whether we're even going to keep this book in the store. And so this was just a long process that I saw from the retail standpoint while I was at Borders, and luckily got out of there before they had to close down, which is still a shame. I loved those bookstores. Let's see. So then really what opened the door for self-publishing was the print-on-demand, the digital technology, where they can literally print, bind a book in a day. So they can do just one, or they can do 500, however many you want, but it's just a different type of printing. So it's gotten progressively better and better, but initially it was really limited in what you could do. There were certain trim sizes that you could absolutely not get. Paper types with digital printing tended to just be a 60-pound or 55-pound white paper, no matte, no gloss. So it had some limitations there. And if you were trying to publish a kid's book or a full color book, it was difficult. It's gotten a lot better now, although there are still some limitations. We probably publish 4 or 5 children's books a year, and I have a couple of them up here that you can take a look at later if you like. But it really, there was a company that opened called Lightning Source, and now they are teamed with Ingram. Anybody heard of Ingram Spark? Yeah? Okay. So Ingram Spark is the arm of Lightning Source that is really for individuals that want to self-publish their book, but don't want to go through, say, an author subsidy company like ours. We will distribute for people. We share in their royalties as our distribution cost. And some people just don't have time, or they don't want to have to deal with, if my book is on Amazon but all the information isn't showing up, or a book order isn't going through, they don't want to have to chase that down, and so they just hire us to take care of it. And it used to be you kind of needed to do that, but now with Ingram Spark, you don't have to necessarily publish through Ingram Spark. You're just uploading files so that they're available for distribution to Amazon, to Barnes & Noble, to all these places, and it's really pretty seamless. If you go on Amazon tonight and you order a book from Inkwater Press, they're going to go to to Lightning Source. Lightning Source is going to print that book and send it out to the customer. Some companies like Amazon will, once they see a couple of books get ordered, they'll order a stock of, say, 5 books to have in their shelves so that they can meet their turnaround time that they talk about with Amazon Prime and stuff like that. So they want to be able to get that book out really quick. They will order some books to have in their inventory. Let's see. So some of the other advantages, clearly environmentally it's better with print on demand, because you're not wasting a lot of paper. So not only do you not have to store all of those, you kind of have this seamless distribution to lots of different online bookstores everywhere. Wholesalers such as Ingram and Baker and Taylor, they also can order your book. But again, depending on what kind of terms they want, returnability sometimes comes into play. And so we've had instances where we thought we were going to be able to sell a book, but then they find out, the bookstore finds out that it's non-returnable. And so they say, well, we're not going to do that. Can you make it returnable? And our experience from losing a lot of money in some of our efforts We just don't do it. However, authors that want to do that, we can help get them set up with Ingram Spark, and they can become their own publisher. And I'll talk a little bit more about that shortly. Let's see. So one of the things that I always noticed when I worked in the bookstore was self-published books. Oftentimes, I could spot from about 50 feet. You would just say, "Wow, who published that?" And I would go and take a look, and sure enough, it would be a self-published title. And we have even graphic designers, professional graphic designers that don't work in the book industry but want to create a book. And it's such a niche design, what do I want to say, skills, a set of skills to design a book, and knowing within the industry what the Chicago Manual of Style, or what's the other, is it APA, I think, what their specifications are, what are book reviewers used to looking at, what are bookstore retailers used to looking at. And I never really thought about that when I was working at Borders. I could tell there was something not right, but I usually didn't really know what it was. And now that I work with designers and I watch this whole process, I can see a big difference right away. And so I think it's important, and that's the other big up factor with traditional publishing is these people know what they're doing. They're gonna edit that book so that it's as strong as it can be. They're gonna really think about the design, not only just the cover, but how is the back cover design? What's in that back cover description? What's in the author bio? How is the acknowledgments page set up? Which side does each chapter start on? Generally, it should always start on the right-hand side. And these are only a few things. I talk to my designer sometimes, or have her come in and talk to our authors, and there are just things that she knows stuff about fonts and colors and where it goes on the page, where your eye follows, and it's amazing. It's amazing to me, but it's really crucial in publishing a book. So as you start to think about self-publishing, one of the things that we really try to focus on is making sure that we're doing all the things for the self-published authors as we do for the traditional authors. We want all of our books to be of high quality. That's also why we review the books beforehand and try to talk to authors about the quality of their particular book. Get them to think about page count. We've had one author came in with how many pages was it? 260,000 word manuscript, which we figure about 30,000 words if it's a 6x9 book like this. 30,000 words would be 100 pages. So you're already looking at close to 900 pages in that one book. And in order to get a print cost down low enough to have a retail price that anyone would even consider looking at, we would probably have to do like a 1,500 copy print run just to lower that price. So we talked to him and really looked at the book to figure out, is there a good breaking point? Is there a way that we could make this into 2 books or 3 books? And he ultimately decided on going with a 3-book series, and it made a lot more sense, and his books were reasonably priced, and we were able to stagger it out over about a year and a half. We released one every 6 months, and so it did well for him. But it is something that I think sometimes authors just think, or certain people just think, oh, I've got this amazing epic story, which in fact they do. But if you're doing it on your own, it's very difficult cost-wise just to keep that price down. And also when you're marketing a book, people are less inclined to launch into something that is going to take such a huge amount of their time. So they kind of need to really want that piece beforehand. So starting off with a smaller book helps them get into it, and then the people that like it will move forward. So these are just some of the little things that we think about. The nice thing about self-publishing is that you control your work. We always say we're going to give you all of our professional candid advice, and you're going to make all the decisions. And you can't hurt our feelings. We're not gonna, you know, you're the one, this is your book, and we're just gonna try to give you all of our best advice and let you end up with what you really want. We take that to another step in that we will talk to you about the marketing of the book and who your target audience is or who you think it is, offer some alternatives to that potentially. And so there's some different elements that we try to get out. A lot of times people have channels and connections that they don't realize that they have, or maybe a passion for something. They have a hobby that they're really invested in, and their book somehow has a relationship with that hobby. Well, we tend to think, let's go down that road instead of, say, a traditional literary approach. So, for example, this book, Tanya Peterson, she's a psychologist, and she wrote this. This is just a novel, but the novel it deals with people with mental health, and in a really touching and you know, sometimes narratives can just pull you into a story a lot more than a non-fiction book. And so she came to us and said, look, I published with Ex Libris or iUniverse, one of the more automated publishers. And we said, well, look, you know, there's 800 books released every day in the United States, and probably 200 of those are literary novels. So if we're just trying to go down the literary route, we have some stiff competition, and we don't have nearly the cash flow or the channels to compete with some of these other books. So what we suggested was, hey, let's look at the mental health industry. And so we started looking at all sorts of different websites. We contacted some experts in the field, sent out. We ended up actually doing an advanced reader copy for her, or an ARC, just like the traditional books do. And I don't know if you can see here what we put advanced reader copy on it. There is no barcode, so it can't be resold. And on the inside, we put advanced reader copy. And so we really sent it out for about 4 months, and then got a bunch of information back from various people that either are well known in the field or have a really great title that somebody might think, wow, that's interesting. And so initially we just put a couple of little things in here, but then once we published, we put all the blurbs in there. And I think we have a praise page here where you can read the full, praise for Peterson's leave of absence. Anyway, long story short, her success didn't come from just the book. Her success came from delving into the mental health industry and connecting. She was blogging with other people. She eventually got a professional blogging paid blogging site with I can't remember which mental health magazine it was. She was asked to go down to San Diego and present And she published her second book with us, also mental health novel. And then the third one, she was picked up by a publisher. So she's had great success, but not just in terms of book sales, because the book sales weren't huge initially, but it was a great branding piece for her to say, wow, this woman really knows a lot about mental health, and she really empathizes with these people, because you can tell in her stories that she can really get inside their skin and feel what they feel and communicate that to people. So generally, that's when I first sit down with an author. I've read through their book. I will say, okay, well, here's some different avenues I see apart from just literary. What is it that you're thinking about doing? And here's how we could potentially leverage all of those things. And then we're going to think about that with the cover that we're using. We're going to think about that in terms of the author bio on the back and the back cover description. My colleague, John Williams, who's our marketing director, he usually does these talks with me, but he has twins that are 1 year old. So he's got his hands full at the moment, but he always talks about the, it's gone. The 1 year olds took it out of my head. We'll come back to him. Let's see. So we talked about speed of publication being a little bit better with self-publishing. We talked about contracts with traditional publishers. Well, same with self-publishing. If you're going to a company like ours where we're author subsidy services, so you can just edit with us, you can just design, you can just market, you can just get a website. There's one of the things that you should be looking at is what sort of rights are you keeping if you're signing on with somebody that helps with self-publishing. And the answer is you should retain all your rights. Anything that any author sends to us, they have the right to, and there shouldn't be a what do they call it? Duration clause where you have to keep it with them for a certain period of time. We ask for 30 days to take it off of our website and get all the information and all of your stuff back to you. It does happen from time to time that say we published your book under Inkwater Press, and we have purchased a stock photo or two that we've used on the cover or in the book. We have an exclusive contract with that company when we purchase that is associated only with that ISBN. So sometimes if an author takes their book because another publisher wants to pick it up, they'll say, oh, well, can I have the full cover? And we'll say, you're going to have to you're going to need a new ISBN, you're going to need to go to this stock photo place and get permission to use it for your new book. It's not an us thing, it's a them thing, it's a copyright thing. So even though you own all the rights, you may not get that full design. You may not get to keep that full design because of little copyright things that unfold. However, if you're picked up by another publisher, they're not going to want our design. They're going to want to do their own thing. But again, something to think about. You should have all of your movie rights. You should have any rights to that particular material. You should retain. Along with some of the positives about self-publishing, there are, of course, negatives to it as well. The quality control is often not there. So there are what I refer to more automated processes that you can go through to self-publish your book, where you can send it to somebody and they're not going to read through it. They'll ask you if you want editing, but they may not really care. It may just be a dollar figure to them. I don't want to speak for them. I'm not going to throw names out, but it's just a different type of company. CreateSpace is great if you if you already have a designed file and you know what you're doing. But what I can tell you is there are lots of reviewers out there that is part of their culling process is CreateSpace, iUniverse, Ex Libris. If they see they're published by those companies, they will not review it. It's the first step in getting rid of that book, because they've got a stack of books there. And it's not because that particular book might not be, that book might be great, but it's the reputation that they have for not having quality control. When 12 Years a Slave came out, they immediately, because the book was public domain, somebody smart in their company said, hey, let's put out our own book, our profits will be a lot higher. And so they quickly threw this book together. We ordered a copy, and first of all, it's hard to read the cover. The cover doesn't tell me anything about the book. I would guess it's probably about slavery. If you look down the spine, there isn't a logo of any kind. You can see we've got our little logo here. It's really bland. They just went completely gray. And on the back, it's just the description in a really large font that just screams that it's not, nobody has paid attention to putting this book together. And I thought, well, you know what, fair enough, maybe they just didn't take time, the cover. So we opened it up, and generally you'll have what's called end sheets in your book. So usually you don't open your book right up to a page with printed material on it. But I was still willing to give them a pass. But then the more I looked at the book, and I don't know if you can see how there's the margin up here and the margin down here is completely off. Further in the book, I think it even gets close to the outside edge. So, you know, their intentions were to just quickly get this book out there, but that's the reputation that the reviewers see, and so therefore they just don't look at that. Now you can still get paid reviews, and just about everybody does them now, including Kirkus. Kirkus is probably the most well-known book reviewer, and they also, no matter whether you're paying for it or not, they will be brutally honest. I think they get a certain pleasure out of just ripping into books. We've never had a book that was completely praised, and that's very common. And so what you do is you go through and you take bits and pieces of nice things that they've said. You can't take it out of context. You can't add words to it, but you take little bits and pieces, and you know, so it says, well, Sean's book was exhilarating, and then the next sentence is, but my God, it was too long, you know. And it's, so that's one element to think about when you're choosing somebody to help you out. Some people, I mean, if you know design, if you know Adobe InDesign, or I think the equivalent in Mac is Publisher, is it still? I'm not sure. But we've certainly had people that have come to us and said, look, I'm designing my book. We have a woman right now that's putting together a picture photography book, and she's been working on it for about 3 years, and she has come in and consulted with our designers a few times, and she's just going to pay us to make sure at the end everything is perfect. So she's going to just pay an hourly fee as opposed to trying to pay for a whole package where we're editing and we're designing. She's already laid it all out, and if you're doing that, that's great. You don't necessarily need to go through a publishing company, because now there's Ingram Spark out there. You can buy your own ISBNs. Really, the self-publishing services should be about what is it that you need? What can you not do yourself? And it's important when you're looking at these different companies trying to make a decision, look at all the books that they have published. Look and see what you think of their their designs. We do this all the time. We go to different websites and try to get a feel for what other people are doing. But you'll get a pretty quick sense of it, and then also go online, put in scam or complaints and the publisher name, and just see how extensive it is. You just want to do your research. And I can't really emphasize that enough. I've heard an awful lot of sad stories about people that have they've spent a bunch of money with somebody and then that company just disappeared, or they just didn't follow through on what they said they were going to do, or there was some fine print in the contract that they signed. So just do your research. Less access to bookshelves, usually. Again, if I was self-publishing, I would focus on my local bookstores in the region, and probably set up consignment deals with them where you just take a contract in 5 books and you just need to check back with them and see if they need more or if they need you to pick up some of the books. But nationally, I would tend to focus my efforts elsewhere than just bookstores. With self-publishing, you don't have the national connections that some of these bigger publishers have. So, what if I do it all myself? What are the costs going to be? If you're doing it entirely for yourself and you're going to be your own publisher, then you're going to have to buy ISBNs. They sell, I was checking prices today, I see about $125 for one, and then it's about $300 for 10. I would absolutely advise you to get 10, just because if there's another format, if you want it in hardcover and paperback, that's 2 ISBNs. Your Kindle, you don't necessarily have to have an ISBN attached to it, but I think Ingram Spark now has an arm that you can put your books on Kindle and EPUB. They will require you to have an ISBN. Of course, there's the cost of the software if you are wanting to try to design the book yourself. I know Adobe has been really smart and great in that they now just do a subscription thing where you can just subscribe to it and you'll have access to it for that month, rather than having to spend $1,000 on a computer program that will probably be updated within the year. So it's a good way to go if you want to and if you're into graphic novels and stuff, that might be something to just look into, because it would be kind of fun, but it's a big learning curve.
Adobe subscription, you said?
Yeah, they do it just a monthly subscription.
We have InDesign, is there?
Adobe InDesign. Editing costs are usually somewhere, depends on what type of editing you're getting, but if it's copy editing and proofreading, then usually it's somewhere between 2 and 4 cents a word, and that's per word in the manuscript, not per change. And the reason being, of course, that usually a good editor is going to go through your book probably 3 times. Usually they'll go through the first time and really look for all the little details of spelling and grammar. The second time it's going to be more the flow and making sure that everything is flowing along, and maybe thinking about, well, does that really fit here, or is that a little bit of an inconsistency? They should be looking at facts that you've put in there. Do they make sense? We used to catch a lot of authors where you can just tell they've thought about it so often and they've written at different times on a particular chapter, and suddenly the river is on the left and the right, depending on where you look at it. And so they should be looking at things like that too. The Northwest here is just rich with literary people. Lots and lots of good editors out there. But I would ask them for an editing sample, if you can. Send them a chapter of your book and say, okay, can you just give me a 4 or 5 page sample of what you would do and give me an idea of what you think you're gonna charge me for this. I think it's a really fair thing to ask, and it helps you feel a little bit better too, just knowing what they're gonna do. Depending on what you want to do with the cover, you may use an image of your own that you have, or go to stock photo sites. There's lots of those that you can purchase an image to start with on your cover. Of course, if you're looking or you feel like you need professional help in that design element, then you're going to want to research different companies that offer book designs specifically. You don't want to look for graphic designers. It's just a very different thing. Ingram Spark, if you're signing up with them, you're probably looking at about, what did we say? Title setup is about $50, I think, for a paperback, $75 for a hardcover. And that's just when you won't pay initially. You'll sign up, open your account. They'll ask for a credit card, I think. And then once you upload your files, that's when they're gonna charge you. And they'll charge you every time. So if you upload an interior file and then you realize, oh my gosh, I misspelled such and such word on page 3, and you go back and change it, they're gonna charge you again to upload that file. But much better going that route than printing 500 copies and then seeing that you've got a misspelling. So that is one advantage to the print-on-demand piece. And then, of course, printing your books is going to be an expense for you. But again, you're only printing books that you yourself are distributing. So you don't have to worry about anything going to Amazon or any of those online places. If you're actually having somebody like Inkwater distribute it, then you also don't have to worry about schools calling you up and saying, oh, I'd like to get 30 copies of that book, and then having to figure out how you're going to ship it and stuff like that. So these are all just considerations. I was talking to an author the other day she's a model, and she said, I would love to just be my own self-publisher, but she's like, I'm all over the country. I don't have time for that. It'd be well worth having somebody else distribute it. So sometimes it just comes down to what your particular circumstance is. And then the final cost is marketing. And I can tell you that marketing is probably the most important piece to the puzzle. I would like to say that if you have a great book, then no matter what, it will get through. But again, 800 books a year, it's really crucial for you to think about your marketing strategy really before you even start spending money to get it published. You should have a good idea of what you want to do. You should have a budget. Take into account, a lot of people forget that when you're mailing copies out or you're even sending postcards and stuff out, that's all money out of your pocket for the mailing, and that adds up pretty quick. So it's a good idea to give yourself, have an understanding of how much you think you want to spend or that you can spend, and keep yourself on that budget so that you can relax a little bit. Because sometimes people think, they're like, oh my gosh, I didn't anticipate that, I didn't anticipate that. And if you're going to publish the book, you want to enjoy it, so be comfortable. There's lots of, we've had people do GoFundMe, we've had people do Kickstarter as well. So there are also, these are good ways to get funding for your book if you decide to go down that route. We've helped people who are wanting to do some of these things, like GoFundMe or Kickstarter. They'll call us and they'll say, hey, can can you give me an idea of what the cost would be so that I can post it online? Sometimes they don't always come back to us, but we're willing to help out with that too, and just give them a good idea about what that total cost would be and what they're shooting for with their fundraising. Okay, I think I've covered a lot of these. What to look for in a self-publishing company. Let's see. Right, so we talked about, the first thing you want to see is, do their books look self-published? If they do, I would be hesitant. Also, a big piece to it when you're finding one of these companies is how is the communication? Are you dealing with, does the first person you talk to in editing know the designer? Are they in the same building? What do they know about your book? Or are you having to start the whole process over at every stage? Or are you involved in the editing and design? Or are they just sort of doing it and saying, okay, there you go, it's edited? You want to sort of suss these things out before they happen. And also just, we get probably a third of our authors are local from somewhere in the Northwest, and it's always nice that they can stop into our office and see that there's essentially about 8 of us that all are within earshot, so we all know about every book that's published. We talk about it, we share title ideas, things like that, and so it's nice to have that more one-to-one feeling and know that you're dealing with people and not just somebody who likes the money that you're giving them to put something out. So, and also if we screw up, you can come down and yell at us in person. Doesn't happen very often, thankfully. Also, make sure that they do ebooks. Although we've had some people that have printed the print book with us or published the print book with us for the distribution, and then had us design the Kindle, and then they go through Kindle Direct Publishing and publish it themselves. It does give them some advantages on Amazon for different advertising elements, so that's how they sort of support the whole exclusivity piece. I think if you publish a Kindle book with them, you can't do the EPUB anywhere else for 3 months, 6 months, something like that. But ebooks I think are great. I've never thought they're going to take over the book industry, but it's a really nice alternative. It's turned me on to a lot of authors that I've then later bought their book because I could get it at a cheap price at first just to look through it. And so I would always recommend trying to do that if you can. Do they offer illustrators if you have a children's book? We don't, but I collect postcards from illustrators that send their postcards to us. And then also we've had a couple of illustrators that have published books with us locally that are really great, and so I often send potential authors to them and say, work it out with them and see if they can do an image for you that feels like it would fit in with your book. One thing I would say about anytime you are illustrating a book, there are lots of things to think about. I would get with the book designer just to get some advice, and so that you're not making mistakes in the illustrations. Really awful when you have to go back and change the size of images and things. But just to give you an idea, this book, Falcons in the City, this goes all the way, the images go all the way to the edge, so we have what's called bleeds. And a bleed is just anything that's going to get cut off in So they'll run these through, and then they'll cut it off, and we say, you know, you need at least 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch around here that you can lose. And then if you're going to have a full page spread, you want to make sure that the face doesn't fall right in the middle and get lost. And then you also want to be aware, we had one guy come in, had a beautiful kid's book that he had done, but had left no space for words anywhere. And so we were like, well, we could do it, you know, on this page, and then you have a picture here. He's like, no. So he had to go back and create some blank space for his work. But so that's something to think about. Also, spine. Usually you need 82 pages to get writing on the spine of your book. So even if it's just a text-driven novel or novella, you want to have at least 82 pages so that you can get the printing on the spine. Talk about time frame. Usually about 4 months to publish, at least with us. We do offer expedited services if there's a real-time issue, but usually it's about 4 months, the whole process. That includes proofing with the author, so you should be able to see proofs and make changes during the design phase. You really should be a part of that whole piece, so you're getting what you want. We mentioned retaining all the rights to your work. Transparency. Transparency of costs is another thing. Making sure that you know what all the extra little costs that can come up, what they are. Not always a perfect solution in that. Sometimes things come up that we don't expect, but we always try to let the author know as soon as we know and say, okay, what should we do? What do you want to do? So if you have specific questions about self-publishing or traditional publishing,
This is kind of an odd question, so if you don't have like a prepared answer, that's fine, but suppose you're a glutton for punishment and you decide, you know what I'm going to do, I'm going to start my own publishing company.
mm-hmm.
Do you have any advice or things
Absolutely.
for that?
I would go through Ingram Spark initially. If you're going to be your own publisher, we've had lots of people.
Like your own press, your own publishing company.
Right. Well, you don't have to have a printing facility though to be a publisher. We don't. That's the only thing we don't have. In fact, I know there's a couple of people in the Portland area that have their own publishing company, but they outsource editors, they outsource some of the design, but they're just the ones that brings all those people together. But Ingram Spark is great for distribution. You can create your own logo. It will look legit if you design it right. But then I would just go out and try to find some good freelance editors, or maybe you know people. You just want to get the best team to work on your books as possible. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
There's no, so basically you just kind of put it together yourself and there's no like official form you have to fill out to say, yes, I'm a press thing that did, right?
Well, I mean, yeah, you're right. I mean, there are some, I've seen some self-published companies out there that you can tell they don't quite have a firm grasp on some of the design or some of the editing. But you know what? For some people, that doesn't matter. I know our designer, she publishes a book every holiday season for all of her nephews and nieces. She's got a series of about 5 or 6 books. She doesn't make any money on them. She just puts them up there, but she enjoys going through the design process. She does get them edited, but it's just, you know, it's what she likes to do as a side job. But she's a very good person. Yes.
Thank you.
So do you have a package price? I mean, I'm sure you can't just give out advice without charges.
Oh no, that's not true. I do that all the time. We have people come in and talk to us, and we usually ask if we can take a look at their manuscript beforehand so that we can talk about what their book is specifically about too. But yeah, no, we do that all the time. And I'll give you my card if you have specific questions. I'd be happy to talk to you about that. And I think that's the whole premise, is that none of us are salespeople there. We're all book people. John, who's our marketing director, he has, he's on William Stafford. I think he's kind of high up in the whole William Stafford community. And he writes poetry and he does the circuit all the time. So yeah, we're just happy to try to help people out and make sure that they're aware of the pitfalls and the right questions to ask.
Yeah. So I've published some books with creates, and I'm, not dissatisfied with them, but I am dissatisfied with the cover.
Right.
They let you design, your own cover.
Yeah.
And they provide images, which are limited.
Yeah.
I don't like the, the font that they have, and they do allow you to create your own cover, but it's very difficult.
Thank you for coming here.
Thank you. Very difficult for me to understand how to do that.
Absolutely, and that's a very common thing. People that do like to do that stuff don't necessarily know what they're doing either. So, that's where we certainly can come in, at least in advice, if nothing else. So, yeah.
So you say if you, is that how you work it out?
You mean
Inkwater
for royalties?
Mm-hmm.
We generally, if we're distributing, it'll be 50% royalty on the net receipts.
Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you. And so that's why we also offer the option of helping you get set up with Ingram Spark, because at the end of the day, that $250 is really just the service charge for distributing and paying attention to your book.
Do you encourage that, or you know?
I do,
Yeah.
if the person has the time to do it, and if they're, it's not that hard with Ingram Spark, to be honest. They're going to send you monthly or quarterly royalty statements, and the thing where it comes into play is if you don't have time, or sometimes books that are published under Inkwater with our logo, we do have a good reputation, even though people know that we self-publish. We have quality control, and so that has helped sometimes, but I don't think it's as big a factor as, if you have more than one book, I would strongly consider doing the Ingram Spark thing. Or some people will start, they'll publish their first book with us, and then the next one they'll say, okay, well, show me how to do this, and then we can even take their old book and we can give it a new ISBN and put their logo on it, and we can put it over with them too. So it just kind of comes down to how savvy you are and how much time you have.
Right, it doesn't sound like you're trying to push it either way.
No,
You're just offering all the services.
Yeah, at the end of the day, that's what we want to do. We want to offer professional services and try to help authors with good books get out there and, just depends on what the author wants to get out of it too, so. Yeah. I do have my cards up here if anybody would like one.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take your books
Yes,
up here?
please do. That's what they're there for.
So is there a particular type of book that's hot right now? Is it nonfiction? Is it fiction? Is it children? What's really, is there something that you think?
Well, thankfully vampires have passed.
Oh my. Oh please.
So yeah, we were getting lots of vampire and zombie books for quite a while. There's no more Harry Potter characters either. I think recently there's been a lot more, and it might just be the region, but environmental books, more historical books. We just published one on Tillamook County and the history of racism in Tillamook County, and that's been a really good following journey about OR7, the wolf that was reintroduced to Oregon. That was our traditional book for this year, and it's doing really, really well. So, yeah, it's more about the quality, you know, than anything else, but that's what I've seen recently.
Thank you. Thank you
All
very
right,
much.
yes, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Hi, I'm Courtney Terry from McMinnville Public Library, and tonight we hosted a publishing workshop in preparation for National Novel Writing Month in November. I'm here with Sean Jones from Inkwater Press up in Portland. Sean, thank you for coming tonight.
Well, thank you for having me. Yes, I had really enjoyed talking with everybody tonight about self-publishing and traditional publishing. And I come from Inkwater Press in Portland, and we've been publishing books for about 15 years, and we think it's really important to get out in the community and talk with folks about their book and just how they can go about getting it out on the market and
Into bookstores.
into bookstores. There you go.
Okay.
Coming up at the library, we have our poetry night at the gallery at 10 Oaks. That'll be on starting at 6 p.m. It's always the first Thursday of the month. You can always find out more about library events by going to our website, www.maclibrary.org, and checking out our calendar.
Inkwater Press, we also have a website. It is inkwater.com, and you can go there to submit a manuscript or find out more information about what to do with your potential new book, or any other services that you're interested in. If you already have a book and want to market it, please come and visit us.
Thank you.